I will be presenting place-based art education as a pedagogical counterpoint to non-place. In this presentation, I will weave in my own photos as well as photos of elementary and middle school students that I've worked with in different capacities. Place-based education is education rooted in the local environment. It involves learning local content as well as learning within the local context. For example, these are some of my former middle school students on a field trip to a landfill. It can also involve outdoor education as well. It is dedicated to helping students develop place consciousness and pro-environmental attitudes and behaviors. An important question for place-based education becomes, how can education be rooted in the local environment and rooted in place when place itself is increasingly ephemeral or non-existent? Augé defined non-place as space lacking meaningful relations with other spaces, lacking historical presence, or lacking concern with identity. It represents capitalist, technologically-mediated spaces of circulation, consumption, and communication. Similarly, Koolhaas described the architecture of non-place as junk space, the sterile, air-conditioned spaces of food courts, conference ballrooms, highway networks, and chemically treated lawns and golf courses. The near inescapability of non-place and its architectural counterpart ensure our everyday existence in cars, parking lots, homes, schools, and neighborhoods is one of continual movement, disorientation, homogenization, technological consumption, and non-events. Educators must take on the complex task, pedagogical task, of how best to facilitate students' relations with place and the biophysical environment, when physical environs, public life, and schooling often work to perpetuate non-place. As non-place represents a form of easy transit, disembodiment, and pseudo-living, the arts might serve as a counterpoint, offering enhanced perception, feeling, and imagination. Intersubjective experiences, such as those experienced through art, can provide greater awareness and connection to place. Through arts education, students might engage in place identifying, discovering the uniqueness of their communities. These middle school students are mapping place and noting important locations to them. This image is the one image in my PowerPoint from a UT student. She's a student teacher interning in at a school in South Knoxville. She engaged in place identifying to construct a sense of place for her larger teaching context. And you can see she's starting to identify some assets in South Knoxville. Through arts education, students might engage in place connecting, forming aesthetic, empathetic relations with the human and more than human world. For example, they might use close observation as part of a slow pedagogy. Slow pedagogy emphasizes direct experiences with the natural environment, explorations of place beyond prescribed zones, and dwelling in place over time. This is in contrast to the rapid or fast-paced experiences and performances of adventure and wilderness education. Tenets of place-based education align with art education that allow for and encourage exploration, play, perspective taking, and extended interactions with materials and matter. These are two drawings that middle school students did after collecting objects on a nature walk around their school. Through arts education, students might engage in placemaking, producing place through fresh artistic forms and relations. For instance, students might create a sculptural installation in their school or community using recycled materials. They might also develop plans for the built environment. This student identified an important place in his community, Brewster's, of course, and imagined it with renewable energy, recycling program, additional green space, and fresh, locally sourced dairy. soon every Brewster's is going to have its own cow. Yeah. As the arts can function as terrain for divergent thinking and acts, we might consider the role they can play in exposing or subverting the dominant cultural discourses underlying non-place, and highlighting or constructing counter-narratives. The previous image drew attention to the dangers of plastic waste, and in this image, students constructed a cow from cow product packaging that they collected during their own lunch period to raise questions about the way we view and treat animals as commodities. I've researched the impact of place-based education with a class of middle school students and found that students began to form empathetic relations with the environment as a result of their participation in the program, and correspondingly found that their pro-environmental orientations increased significantly. Contributors to those empathetic relations with the environment included opportunities to experience the environment directly, opportunities to care for the biophysical environment, and opportunities to work for change. Over the past decade, artists have begun to attend to non-place and junk space, revealing, complicating, and revisualizing them. Direct experiences with art and the environment can help us to move beyond the habitual, to see the operations of non-place, and consider how we might live within it. Thank you.